Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dhruva Jaishankar. I'm a fellow foreign policy here, and it's a privilege to moderate a brief discussion over the next 45 minutes or so with four authors, all from different Indian think tanks, who have been working on BIMSTEC. So while while it hasn't been gaining as much attention for the last few years, there's been a bit of a resurgence in the last 2 years with the summit in Goa a few years ago, and now with the forthcoming summit in Nepal. So we have Joyeeta Bhattacharjee, who's written a paper on SAARC versus BIMSTEC, the search for the ideal platform for regional cooperation. She's with the Observer Research Foundation. Prabir, who's written 20 years of BIMSTEC, promoting regional cooperation and integration in the Bay of Bengal. He's with RIS. Constantino, my colleague, who you've already heard from, who wrote this really interesting paper in his previous iteration at the with Carnegie India on bridging the Bay of Bengal towards a stronger BIMSTEC. And finally, last but not least, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, who has written a report for FICCI called Reinvigorating BIMSTEC, an Industry Vision for the Next Decade. What I thought I would do is ask each of them one or two questions on specifics related to their report, and then very quickly open it up so that we can have a discussion. Let's start with Joyeeta, if you don't mind kicking us off. You've compared in your report BIMSTEC and SAARC. Does it make sense to assume that BIMSTEC could be a replacement for SAARC, or do you think India will continue to privilege SAARC as a institution for regional integration? BIMSTEC, yeah.
I think I'm audible now. Yeah. First, let me thank you, Brookings, and also Tino, for organizing this August gathering and giving me a chance. Thank you, Dhruva and Tino, both. Let me quickly get into the question that you have asked, whether BIMSTEC could be an alternative to SAARC or not. My paper that I have focused actually deals directly into this issue, and during the course of my research, I had to interview a lot of people, and one of the very interesting things, definitely BIMSTEC in last 2 years got major traction, but whether I think it will be misnomer to say that BIMSTEC is an alternative to SAARC or they are competing each other. I would like to see more as an complementary, both the organization complementing each other, because BIMSTEC stands in a very interesting way. It is connecting both two very regions with lot of promising regions with lot of potential. So it is more, I would say, a bridging, and it gives an opportunity. So BIMSTEC is, I would say, stands at the crossroad of Asia, and it is an opportunity to learn best from what is there in SAARC and also ASEAN. So this is an opportunity. And second, and another important outcome I thought I should share, because whenever BIMSTEC is normally seen to be mostly that it needs an anchor, and India is definitely playing that role right now, but BIMSTEC also engages a lot of smaller neighbors, and when there is SAARC and BIMSTEC, the smaller neighbors feel more involved in BIMSTEC because of that concept of lead country, that so they feel much more stake, have much better stake. So this is something important we really have to understand. So neither competing, complementary, and go ahead. Whether India can privilege BIMSTEC, definitely India is doing it. A lot of people say what, but understanding the geopolitics and reality ahead, I don't think there is, for India there can't be, India can't go back. It is a process forward, and BIMSTEC stands at the center of India's two major foreign policy priorities, Actist and Lookist. It's for neighborhood first and Lookist. So if India wants to emerge as a major superpower in coming times, BIMSTEC is going to be a major focus area which India just can't overlook. So this is an area we have to, and India will continue the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Prabir, if I can ask you, we heard a little bit from the ambassador about the prospects of a BIMSTEC free trade agreement, or at the very least, a priority on economic integration and connectivity. What does the future hold in these areas for economic integration? What are some of the obstacles also to greater economic integration?
Thanks, Dhruv. It's always great pleasure coming to Brookings and talking to anything that's when invitation comes. I think this is its 21st year of establishment of BIMSTEC, and we are about to negotiate 21st round of Trade Negotiation Committee, TNC. So I think 21st is a big problem with the region. I mean, I don't know why, because the last TNC meeting was held in Konkan in 2015. So last 3 years we could not call the member states. Now we call member states. That is not member countries, by the way. So member states means that almost the 7 countries, they have started thinking more deeper linkage with the region. So and we have a total interregional volume is coming something around in current price US dollar 40 billion, and in percentage term is 7%. So if you compare inter-regional trade in BIMSTEC, it's not a very, in comparison with other regional blocks, it's not a very healthy sign. But as you said, Dhruv, very correctly, that there are many barriers, obstacles, and which is quite obvious, because we need to overcome these barriers, because we need to know the challenges. Now, what happened when the framework agreement in 2004 was signed, and thereafter we have working group setups, one for goods, one for services, one for rules of origin, one for investment, one for legal matters, one for dispute settlement, and one for protocol to amend the framework agreement. So there are 6 agreements that are being negotiated through different working groups. Now, and on top, there are 2 supra, committees. One is the Trade and Economic Affairs ministerial level meeting, and another is a senior officer level meeting. So these all committees and the working groups, they negotiate, they report through the BIMSTEC Secretariat, and then it goes to the summit level. That's the working mechanism that's happening. 4th summit is coming. So we have 21st year of establishment, only 4. And our mandate is to negotiate 6 agreements. Now, condition was given why the FTA was not concluded is that first we negotiate goods. Once it is done, then we'll jump into services, then investment, and then blah, 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 and other things like trade facilitation, which are not very difficult. In the process, they realized that we need to facilitate on a fast track basis. So 3 things came in instead of 1: goods, investment, and services, and they are 3 interlinked. Now, as Excellency said in his presentation, sometimes BIMSTEC moods go up, sometimes down, depending on the country leads or given emphasis. So those who are member of the negotiating team, it all depends how much energy is given. RCEP is one angle. Countries are feeling, in which I have written recently, that the agreement fatigue. And if you see the op-ed came out in the Business Line Hindu by Mr. Srivastav, who is a director in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, is showing in statistics that gone with the days of regional agreement. It is all about bilaterals. And the trade routed through the FTA for South Asians is precariously very low. The countries who are using FTA process, which is USA, for their exports about 40%, for their import about 45%, European Union. But other countries utilizing the FTA for their trade and trade transaction is not very healthy. Why it is so low even there is a FTA negotiated? Because the change in utility of the consumers and citizens. For example, in the BIM-SARC or in ASEAN, we have a sensitive list, negative list, so many. But demand for those over time has increased. But we didn't change ourselves in terms of negotiating our FTA. So I just to wind up my views at this stage, that we haven't done much. But the good point is that on FTA, the goods agreement has been almost negotiated. All the countries have exchanged their negative list, the receipt. Sri Lanka was the last to actually send their list to the Secretariat. So 7 member countries, they have already declared what could be their strategy. But bigger economies here, Thailand, who is a permanent chair of trade negotiation, and India, there are some issues between them on services, like retail. India doesn't allow multi-brand retail. So they demand that there has to be some retail on this. So there are issues between the two, which on services has to be sorted out next. But, so some countries, they demand that we need to change the format of agreement. Framework agreement signed in 2004. In 2004, there was no RCEP, no bigger agreement, so how can we now think about it? So there are some issues, but Secretariat confirmed to us, confirmed to me, that 21st round of trade negotiation meeting will take place after the summit in the Kathmandu. Just to add in this, that even if we have a FTA, we may not sure that there will be a value chain which is cross-border type. Rosana Industrial Estates of Thailand, they're developing an industrial park in Sri Lanka. And some Indian companies like Tata's, they have taken about Thai companies. So there is a good development happening. But if that momentum continues, I think the value chain will pick up in processed food, horticulture, focusing northeast of India, and there are many other sectors. But to drive it, you need a big, I think, the good political push. Because the one we have received in the Goa, in the sideline of the BRICS BIMSTEC summit, the mini summit in the Goa. After that, all this motor vehicle agreement, coastal shipping agreement, all these have negotiated. This political push is very important. So I think I'm very optimistic on this BIMSTEC, and I hope that every ideas are known to us. So it is, the last one is the Secretariat that I must mention here, the BIMSTEC Secretariat, who has the responsibility to negotiate, to drive. There is about 1.5 billion population, these 7 countries. This is relatively small. One Secretary General, he has almost nil power, no power to run it, no fund. Thailand and India, you should give us a fund, to give 10 billion fund, something like that. So and that Secretariat has to be strengthened. Otherwise, just few directors and then one Secretary General cannot just deliver. Thank you, Dhruva.
Thank you, Prabir. Ambassador Bhatia, you've, of course, led this FICCI report. What do you think is the role of industry that industry has to play in the evolution of BIMSTEC?
Thank you very much, Dhruv. It's wonderful to be here. Let me begin first by showing you a very substantive publication that was produced by FICCI by actually a very important task force which comprised a range of business leaders, experts, former diplomats, scholars. So this is the latest and up-to-date study on BIMSTEC. Now it's very interesting that I think I want to, as I answer your question, I want to blend or nuance Prabir's optimism with a degree of reality check and caution. The fact of the matter is that on the one hand, business and industry in most of our countries hardly know much about BIMSTEC. The visibility is so low and the awareness is so pathetic that the moment we walk out of the confines of a think tank and move into the setting of a business headquarters, they just always start with the first question, what is BIMSTEC? So what is the industry dimension over BIMSTEC? That is even more difficult to answer. But at the same time, I think when it comes to the whole question of looking for and encashing the opportunities of business in the areas that are adjacent to the BIMSTEC countries, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, Bangladesh, then that part of India, the northeast region, they understand this very well. They may not have heard of BIMSTEC, but they understand the rationale that we need to connect, we need to trade more, we need to be connected at the people's level and so on. So when we did this study, we found that in fact there is a very interesting perception survey which also has been included here, and the discerning business people as well as all the experts interested in BIMSTEC, they presented a very positive, forward-looking picture. Prabir was part of it, and I'm sure that was the reason why it was also very forward-looking. Here, the idea is that there should be more linkages. They even recommend that FTA, we should go ahead. But the fact of the matter is that there's going to be no FTA in Kathmandu. I think we should call a spade, because otherwise we may go with the impression that next week, who knows, maybe there would be a FTA. I think the crucial thing, Dhruv, is there are about 7 or 8 agreements on the table. So if out of that 2 or 3 or 4 get signed or get nearly finalized, that would be a big development. The other thing is very interesting, which is that, for last 1 year, the foreign ministers decided to set up an eminent persons group to look at how to rejuvenate BIMSTEC. That has still not been done. So maybe this will be brought up now to the table of the heads of governments, and they would try to give a push to this. But I think the most important thing is whether we would be talking about BIMSTEC a week after the summit. Because, this cycle that we have developed in national capitals, 1 week before the summit, 3 days after the summit, this is a newspaper cycle. And then even think tanks, forget the others. They lose interest, they move on to something else. This is no way to really do something for the institution. And that is the reason why I feel that if BIMSTEC would remain the club of foreign ministries, it has no chance to move forward. If it becomes a whole of the government approach, and if it becomes the whole of the polity approach, which means all of us remain engaged with BIMSTEC, then I think industry and civil society and the governments would be able to do something about this institution.
Thank you. And Tino, to kind of build upon something that Prabir said, is BIMSTEC endowed with sufficient human and financial resources to deliver on, even if it is a scaled down agenda a little bit to a more focused agenda of 5 issues or 5 areas, does it have the wherewithal to actually implement some of that?
No. I think you've heard that this morning several times, and I think I'll briefly just go touch on one, I think, main finding in this BIMSTEC adventure I had over a year or two talking to different people. And simply the answer is no, because regions create organizations. Certain regions exist because of identity, history, and culture, and then you have multilateralism on top of that. Sometimes organizations create regions. I don't want to say that necessarily happened in ASEAN, but in many ways ASEAN created more of a sense of regionness in Southeast Asia, which was not there in the 1940s and 50s. So ASEAN is a good example of where an economic geopolitical agenda created a sense of identity which is very shared now among the new generations of Southeast Asians. In the Bay of Bengal, the puzzle and the funny thing is that you had a sense of community. That's why we titled this event Bay of Bengal Community. And we heard the ambassador of Thailand speak about Thailand's long attachment to the Bay of Bengal. Today, I just gave an interview to a newspaper in Nepal, the Annapurna Express, and I had a puzzling question from them when they asked me why should be Nepal interested in BIMSTEC? We're not on the Bay of Bengal. And I had to remind these young Nepalese journalists who obviously don't know their history often, that's the tragedy of this, that Nepal had all of its trade relationship, not to the north and northwest of India, but to the northeast and east of India, to Orissa, through Dhaka, through Kolkata. Nepal's traditional economic and even geopolitical relation was often towards the Bay of Bengal. And not towards the north and Tibet often. There was important links there, but that sense has been lost. Nepal used to have a very important consulate in Kolkata, which was very influential in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the diplomatic posting of Nepal. All that disappeared. So you have, this puzzling situation where you have now, until a few years ago, a container to be shipped from Kolkata to Dhaka having to be transshipped in Sri Lanka. Right? I mean, you have a sense of complete disconnectivity in this disconnection in this region, which has to be overcome. And the region is important, the organization is important, because you have today a secretariat of a staff of less than 10 people, a secretary general, a secretariat which was created only 16 years after the foundation of the organization, 2014. A secretariat which was manned by a secretary general, a second now, and 2 directors for 2 years. And India actually, took 2 years to appoint and place its own director to the organization. So Bhutan and Bangladesh had their directors at the secretariat, and it took India 2 years to have its own director appointed. So you see a lot of expectations, commitment, and speeches, but without a functioning headquarters, secretariat, a budget. The budget of this BIMSTEC secretariat is $200,000. $200,000 may sound to us here a decent amount, but it's absolutely nothing compared to the budgets of ASEAN and any other meaningful regional organization. It barely pays the rent and salaries of the less than 10 people who have this headquarters. So we can talk so much in 14 groups about cooperation in so many areas, but when you don't have the capacity to translate this into actual operational issues on the ground, it's very difficult to talk about regional cooperation. India, for example, takes on the biggest share of the budget, 32% among all other 7 countries. But in the same year in which we had the BIMSTEC BRICS leadership retreat in Goa, 2016, and Prime Minister Modi speaking about the importance of BIMSTEC, that was the same year in which the Ministry of External Affairs had granted $18,000 to BIMSTEC. 18, not 80. Right? This was the amount coming. Now it's $1 million. The Ministry of External Affairs has allocated for BIMSTEC affairs. So you see the increasing interest, and I think that's really the importance of endowing the Secretary with human, financial, technical expertise also from advisors to translate the BIMSTEC vision into practice.
Joyeeta, you wanted to...
Build up on Tino's thing. Why in BIMSTEC is very relevant today, and we really see hope in BIMSTEC. I can tell my personal experience. When in 2015 I visited the Secretariat, I was staying just in Gulshan, but it was very difficult. When I asked the cab driver to take me to BIMSTEC, we took half an hour roaming around. On 2016, when I went there, just in the same October 2016, I asked the cab driver, I said, I want to go to BIMSTEC. They said, okay ma'am, you will be there. And within 5 minutes from the same address, I was there. So that really one way showcases how important and how BIMSTEC is picking up. Another is that what I wanted to point here, it's definitely in BIMSTEC is right now India driven, but in the long run we also have to see the politics involved. Too much of India-driven initiative might bring in some sort of politics in it. So it will be very important to how to look forward and deal with it. So my idea will be to extend more to increase stakeholdership of smaller partners, or to bring in more partners in the BIMSTEC. That is very important to make BIMSTEC more relevant. And here I would try to see how to strengthen or encourage more smaller partners in it. And I think right now it is the very opportune time to bring them here. And I really see that Bangladesh could really play an important role here. It is already the host for BIMSTEC Secretariat, and also it claims the name the Bay of Bengal. But more on a serious note, that Bangladesh is a country, it is, as just now, right now you have said, they are developing. They have already clarified to become a middle income country and aspires to become a middle developed country. So they really need to look into more regional groupings to take all these positive things from FTA and all. So this is a very important area, and this is something makes me more hopeful, but my strong recommendation will be that to engage and expand BIMSTEC. And BIMSTEC should not be seen only, as rightly sir said, that MEA-driven thing. We have to think about a BIMSTEC community, and here 4 of us sitting from different think tanks together, and this is how the BIMSTEC community is formed, and it is the BIMSTEC of Bay of Bengal for the people, it's for its community. BIMSTEC should go ahead in that line. Thank you.
I'd like to open it up for questions we have about 10 minutes or so. But one issue that hasn't been touched upon, and gets to Dinaka's question earlier, on the security side, one area of potential cooperation will really be in terms, I believe there are discussions underway to this effect on counterterrorism exercises involving the BIMSTEC countries. So I think we may see an announcement to that effect in Kathmandu. But let's start in the front here.
It's very interesting to hear from experts and from Ambassador. He has said many things, but lot many things he intended were also understood. We have all known the progress. From India's perspective, I would like to understand from the experts mainly. For India, it was out of the frustration from the SARC initiative, where it did not work to India's advantage, that India went into the sub-regional cooperation mechanisms, BBI and BIMSTEC and whatnot and all that. At the same time, within its own regional context, India has faced a major problem through this perceived big brother syndrome. And you touched upon it, we should get more smaller countries into the bargain. If you get the bigger ones, we will be back to square one. Now, is it true? How do you perceive that lack of progress? Is it due to, in your view, India feeling that it doesn't want to really push it so much that it is seen only as India-centric? Or is it because India is looking for other options in the Indo-Pacific?
Let's just take a few questions. 1 minute in the back. Shruti, in the back here.
My question is actually similar to what Sir just asked. India, even in SARC, the formation happened during Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's rule, and India did not manage to gain the kind of leadership that it should have, and this big brother attitude was not seen, so it was not taken so well by the neighboring countries. And so do you think India has the potential to now take up, step up and take the leadership role that countries like Thailand are expecting it to take? And my second question is, India as a country has even now has not focused on the Northeast as much as it should have, and forming a grouping with in an area where that region of the country will be the focus. How successful do you think India will be in being able to tackle that grouping?
We have, two quick questions in the front, please. Huh? No, if you please keep it very brief.
Yeah, I'm General Mehta. My question is to the lady here. You used a very critical word, last 2 years. And that last 2 years is also linked to what this gentleman said. So do you think there is a case for doing what Ambassador from Thailand has suggested, to make BIMSTEC focus mainly on market-driven activities? In other words, make it an economic grouping, focus on economic grouping, rather than have all the other areas which are there. You've already reduced from 14 to 5. And out of these 5, there needs to be a focus on what, where is the money? Make money.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he says, and I agree with him.
Sure.
Very brief to Prabir. What impact will ASEAN dynamics have on BIMSTEC? Will it succeed or not because of ASEAN preponderance? And Ambassador Bhatia, Bay of Bengal being the theatre of contest between the two big, the dragon and the elephant, will that make BIMSTEC succeed?
Okay.
Just go ahead.
Yeah, we'll just have. Why don't you take it? But if
I'll
just
just
to recap some of the questions and all of you should feel free to.
I just want to, with your permission, touch on this thing which is coming up again and again: BIMSTEC, SAARC, and India SAARC. And I'll just very briefly touch, Suresh, I think BIMSTEC SAARC juxtaposition is now completely meaningless. I think we have to recognize rationally that BIMSTEC represents a special area. India's neighborhood has changed eastward decisively. And so, while in the past BIMSTEC may have been an add-on, now it has its own logic, and it has to be seen as an area which stands alone area. Only then we would be able to progress. So there is no choice between SAARC and BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC has to move forward. If and when SAARC moves forward, that is also good, because there is no contradiction in goals and elements between SAARC and BIMSTEC, just as there is no contradiction between BIMSTEC and ASEAN. I think our mindset has to change now very clearly. With regard to India's leadership and role in BIMSTEC, I think what we can say very clearly are two propositions. Number one, undoubtedly, given the size and location and resources, India's leadership is absolutely crucial. But the second proposition is important. India's leadership will have to be inclusive leadership. India's leadership will have to include the ability to take everybody along, because we don't have any fundamental dispute or difference with the rest of the membership of BIMSTEC. I think that is very, very important. With regard to the Bay of Bengal, I think I still do not see China playing a negative or directly problematic role. I think Bay of Bengal community that all of us want, and I have not emphasized on that yet, is to really point out to esteemed Ambassador of Thailand. General Sahab, 5 areas are suggested by them. This has not yet been agreed by BIMSTEC. Who knows what happens, but my own submission would be that actually there are not 14 but 15 areas. 14 are original areas, but in the retreat, leaders agreed on one more idea, which was blue economy. So I would be much happier that BIMSTEC were to focus on 6 areas, 5 that you have very kindly listed out, but 6th has to be blue economy, because only then this idea which is mentioned on the screen, Bay of Bengal community, comes up. And you know how the ideas come up. When at retreat blue economy came up, then the Nepalese said we don't have sea, so how about doing the mountain economy? All right, mountain economy we can add on, there is no problem, but that does not detract us from the Bay of Bengal community, and I think we should go ahead on that. Thank you.
Joyeeta, a few questions were directed at you, specifically including the Northeast question, if you could address that.
You said, first I will address the Northeast question. First you have to understand that why India was not getting so much focus on the Northeast from the development point of view. There was always this intent, but there was conflict. We have to accept that the peace somewhere was not the way we would have loved. So what the government of India first did, that we focused on peace in Northeast, and along with it, we have driven the development agenda. But it is not that all of a sudden it happened. For Northeast India, the economics was always eastwardly looking. So it was always there. What we are just trying to do is to reconnect and reinvigorate the whole process together. So it is not something which has happened all of a sudden. The project was always there. As we who come from Northeast and working on the Northeast policy for quite some time now, the idea was there, the efforts was there. Because of certain internal reasons, that thing didn't happen. So it's not new. Second, sir, you said economics. Definitely, economics is going to play a role. What I was talking about my research in last year, it was the perception of the stakeholders whom I surveyed. But if you see, the process had already begun. The negotiations, as Prabir has rightly said, the trade was one of the important focus, and for 21 round already, the 21st negotiation is going to happen. So this is not all of a sudden, and economics remains the center of BIMSTEC, but along with it, we have to create, because BIMSTEC not only represents economics, it also represents the Bay of Bengal, which talks about the people. And if you talk about the people, economics, people, the Bay, so it is an incorporation of all the things. So economics will play, but other things also need to be incorporated to make it successful and more relevant. Thank you.
Prabir, any question? Anything you want to ask?
Quickly answer to Sir questions that I think there are overlaps we have a ASEAN SAARC BIMSTEC division in the MEA, and also ASEAN division in separately. Both actually report to Secretary East in the MEA. Commerce Ministry comes only when the trade negotiation comes. But larger aspects of the BIMSTEC, it is with the MEA. Now there are coordination issues in between, sir. You know it very well. I don't need to tell here. So, but the good thing is that which was not there when the BIMSTEC division was set up and Ambassador Gondane was appointed first JS to work on it. That time the matter on BIMSTEC and SAARC was FS. Now it has come to Secretary East for last 2-3 years. The internal change, things happen. And with 2006 political direction, things have moved slightly, I think. We need lots to jump, but we have just made some beginnings, good beginnings. And when we ASEAN India, we are moving into a next round with several other activities, the maritime cooperation and security in the focus. I think BIMSTEC integration, cooperation will be a wheel which will move ASEAN in India or ASEAN in total, again, much faster. So this complement each other, I think, is the way I look at it. But it's all depend how our diplomats and all people, they maneuver, they guide it. I think I know them, that they have to deliver it. Otherwise, it will be just another shop, might be. That should not be. So, and the gentleman who was there, who raised the one, I think Ambassador Bhatia has rightly said, sir, it's correctly. But I think while I work with the track 1 people professionally, I think India's big brother attitude is a bit loud word remarks. I don't think India does it. And it's a benign policy that we have seen it. When Thailand and other members, they agree, then India comes and they said support. None of them, motor vehicle agreement, coastal shipping agreement, and none of actually the India's proposals, by the way. It has come actually from Bangladesh, the coastal shipping agreement, motor vehicle from Thailand, and several others from other member countries. So, thank you.
And Tino, just to wrap up, anything?
Just on the security issue, I mean, that's one area where India has actually taken initiative. And I think it's important because, again, another typical question is, why security? Let's focus on economics. I think it's difficult to separate both. Economics and security are linked. If India is not able to stabilize the northeast, if Myanmar is not able to stabilize its northern border, if you don't have basic peace and stability in those cross-border regions on the continental side, you will not have connectivity, you will not have roads, you will not have the safety passage of trades and people across those borders. So security is important, counterterrorism is important, and security is not only high typical security of military counterterrorism operations, it's also a disaster response. 17 of the 25 most devastating cyclones in the world have taken place in the Bay of Bengal in the last 200 years. Almost 500,000 people have lost their lives in the last 20 years in Bay of Bengal countries because of natural calamity. So security is important for connectivity and also for prosperity, wealth, and I think the security of populations. And then just the final issues on, I think I really hope that next week we won't have another set of beautiful, visionary, lofty speeches. We've had 20 years of those. I think it's time, and I focus on, I think, the importance of prioritizing sectors, which Ambassador mentioned here before, the importance of focusing on priority areas, and the importance of giving the human, technical, and financial resources to the Secretariat and the autonomy to take a lead and initiate, convene, because that's absolutely important. No organization can be led from 7 different capitals. There has to be a coordinating and leading role played by headquarters, and for that you have to massively invest and expand that secretariat.
Thank you for that. Just to end on a couple of notes that I thought might be interesting at the very least. When it comes to incorporating the Northeast into a lot of the regional connectivity infrastructure, I'd like to emphasize the fact that the GDP of Assam alone is more than Cambodia and Laos combined. And so when Southeast Asians sort of look west from Thailand, and this was Thaksin's mantra as well, from Thailand, the importance of even incorporating Northeast India into the regional architecture, I think, cannot be understated. The other thing, and I know this is not a session on SAARC, but there are some lessons we can look back upon as to how not to develop certain institutions. And SAARC was really initially pushed, by the way, by Bangladesh, as Joyeeta would know, and the focus on the consensual approach that it finally adopted was really done for 2 very different reasons. One, India was worried about the other 6 countries ganging up against India and holding it down. Pakistan saw this as a possible vehicle for Indian regional expansion. And so the compromise that was reached was that a consensual approach would be taken, which has also then led to a kind of path dependency, and we've seen that's also exposed the limitations of the organization in many ways. So I think there are some lessons that we can draw upon as BIMSTEC evolves as to how not to design institutions so that they can reach their full potential. But on that note, it's up to me to thank all our panelists, thank all of you for staying and for attending this, and I'm sure we will see a lot more of this in the news in the coming few weeks. Thank you.